Next, today we will continue to talk about the latter part of the practice of samatha meditation. The literal meaning is not hard. Yesterday's content was challenging. Today's is simpler. Profound and subtle Dhamma is rarely encountered in eon. We can follow it, maybe realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate sentient beings, please generate bodhicitta before today's teaching. All right, now let's continue discussing the treatise Profound Instruction on Samatha. It's Mipham Rinpoche's instruction on using the mind to observe the mind. This practice was discussed yesterday. For anyone wishing to engage in spiritual practice, it's best to first see whether your own mind is capable or not. If our mind is always distracted outward and unfocused or sinking inward into dullness, we're never able to actually apply it to practice in real life. Then no matter how much we study and contemplate on the surface, no matter how proficient we become in exoteric and esoteric scriptures, or if we score quite well on exams, when it comes to facing our afflictions or suffering in our lives, our strength is very weak. So now that we have the opportunity to practice like this, whether you are attending teachings, or as I see it, even when I am giving teachings, it is truly a wonderful karmic connection for both sides. Just look at how many people there are in the world. As we know, only a very few individuals are truly nourished and sustained by the precious nectar of the Dharma, like this. Many people really want to listen, really want to receive it, but due to various unfavorable causes and conditions, circumstances of degenerate age, they still cannot access these teachings at this time. They end up muddling through life, and this precious human life has already passed by. So we really shouldn't think that not in any way, for any reason whatsoever, studying the Dharma is ordinary or that everyone can do it. That's probably not the case. Indeed, if we compare the circumstances of the past, future, and present from every perspective and in every possible way, in all respects, it's extremely rare to be able to hear the Dharma. His Holiness once said, in a very gentle and thoughtful manner, 9 years of practice cannot compare to the merit of hearing the Dharma even once. Sometimes when talking about the importance of practice, it is said practice is more important than listening to teachings. But when emphasizing the importance of hearing the Dharma, we say listening is emphasized over practice. So today, when everyone here have this opportunity, it is always best to keep every teaching in your heart or write it down in your notebook if you prefer, so that you can grasp and understand its meaning every day. This is very important. Earlier we talked about how to practice the method of calm abiding. I introduced this method to everyone, and now let's continue our discussion. When there is no thought and dullness arises, let it be and rest naturally. When strong thoughts arise, since the movement itself is mind, look into its nature, stop the movements and rest on the nature, and the thoughts naturally cease. Here, as mentioned earlier, whether our mind is clear, empty, or active, at such times do not try to suppress it. Instead, you should gradually and gently protect it and let it rest in its own true nature for a moment. As for this key instruction, regardless of whatever thoughts arise, whatever may come to mind, whether movements, the mind rests, or dullness, all of these are already resting on this original mind. This is a key to mind observing, mind meditation practice. Sometimes our mind becomes devoid of thoughts and dull, almost as if we have fallen asleep. Sometimes we feel sleepy. Sometimes it almost feels as if we're just sinking inward continuously, especially, which is referred to as dullness. When you are in such a state of mind, there's no need to feel particularly upset about it at all. Just let your mind simply relax, take a deep breath, and gradually and gently relax and rest. For example, you can slightly lift your head, or just look outside, or stand up and walk around for a moment. Rest in such a relaxed way when you feel dullness. If you are lost in dullness and unawareness, then this can't even be considered real practice. This often happens in practice. Many people, when meditating, end up falling asleep while sitting only to wake up next day. Last night I was meditating, but how come I didn't even take off my clothes and just fell asleep like that? Actually, this is also a kind of obstacle. Just like discussed yesterday, when thoughts arise strongly, if you are not in a state of dullness, but your thoughts, as you observe your mind, a very strong and compelling thought unexpectedly arises. For example, anger, jealousy, or a troubled mind. As you might sometimes experience, a particularly powerful thought suddenly arises. When this happens, you just continue to observe it slowly for just a little bit longer, and there's no need to worry too much about it. When a thought arises, you don't have to suppress it immediately. Just observe the one that moves is the mind itself. Fundamentally, no matter whether our thoughts are of anger, greed, or virtuous thoughts, faith, any kind of thought, in fact, it never truly leaves the scope of the mind, not even for a single moment. So if it is the mind, as we said earlier, it is either luminous or it is empty in nature, or perhaps it is some other kind of similar thought. With these thought movements, allow them to gradually settle into stillness. Allow them to rest, observe and remain with them. Keep carefully observing them and remain settled. Stop movements and rest on the nature. Stopping here refers particularly to control, or in other words, preventing it from continuing to waver. For example, when I experience anger arising, anger is really quite serious after all is said and done. At this time, I carefully observe my own anger and do not let it continue to arise. If you keep thinking, this object is so terrible, or there's no need for that, let the continuity of anger or discursive thoughts come to a stop. Then slowly let it gather back into its own nature. At such times, all these discursive thoughts or movements will usually naturally disappear on their own. Just like those drifting clouds, if you simply leave them up there in the sky, they will gradually and naturally vanish into the wide open sky. So all of our discursive thoughts, if you don't continue adding fuel to their flames, don't keep feeding them all sort of things, don't feed them, don't nurture them. When you are in the midst of generating a thought, simply rest your mind right on that thought. The key point here is resting. The key to 9 stages of abiding is also simply to rest right there on that spot. If it were Dzogchen, upon recognizing the true nature, desire self-liberates, anger self-liberates. But we are not talking about Dzogchen. We are saying that whenever you generate any particularly intense, with a strength that is especially noticeable, so strong that it stands out, when you generate this kind of particularly intense discursive thought, at that moment, just naturally relax into its presence, let it be just right over there. This is possible. Though you haven't cut it off, I'm having discursive thoughts, what can I do? Some people sometimes pull their own hair or even begin to repeatedly slap their own face, sometimes quite forcefully, with their hands. But there's no need for that. If thoughts arise, don't suffer over it. Having discursive thoughts is normal. For living beings like us, it's natural to have various thoughts and impulses arise. There's really no need to deliberately, intentionally, or purposefully suppress them either. But just don't let them keep on arising endlessly or generating more thoughts. Let them simply settle back into their own nature. At that point, like clouds disappearing into the sky, or like delicate translucent bubbles vanishing completely and directly in water, these impulses gradually dissolve into the alaya, storehouse consciousness, or within your own mind nature, they simply won't arise. This is called calm abiding, which is a state of stability and clarity. Each of these has different methods. No matter wavering or still mind, awareness is in the mind. This is called the mind abiding in itself. Generally speaking, for all of us, really, whether it's the restless, wavering mind or the unmoving, calm, still mind, no matter what state it is, in fact, you need to consistently maintain a single clear awareness. If the mind is wavering, there is awareness. If the mind is still, there is awareness. This awareness arises within the mind itself. Let our hearts always maintain clear awareness. Then you don't let it continue to proliferate. Rest in that awareness, just like this, abiding in the mind. Let it gradually settle in this state. This is what is often called the mind abiding in itself. When we say mind abides in itself, it doesn't mean, for example, that you force yourself to abide or that you suppress yourself. It's not like that. Actually, whether you have any arising thoughts or movements, or the clear mind abides, regardless of which, all of them should rest in their own nature, in innate awareness. There is a clear awareness. Clear awareness is not about fixating specifically on any particular place. For example, when a thought arises, I don't follow it. I think to myself, oh, I just had a delicious meal at noon today. At this moment, when you observe with right mindfulness and awareness, then you don't continue thinking further at all. You've already thought, I had hot pot for lunch today, and that one particular dish was especially incredibly delicious. At this point, there's no need to force yourself to stop. When you're thinking about the cauliflower or dried tofu in the middle of the pot and how tasty it was, how especially delicious it was. When you think it, just let your mind rest right there for a moment. Such discursive thought won't keep going. It will gradually settle and remain right there. Or if you don't have any particular thoughts, it's like a clear awareness. It's clarity and bliss without thought, clarity and emptiness. When you're in this state of clear awareness, rest in that awareness without being too obvious. Don't let it extend into a more discursive thinking. That's not the case. At this time, let it gently and softly maintain itself in your mind, allowing it to simply settle there. This is what's commonly referred to as the mind resting on the mind, is like this. Just as a way to illustrate the point, for example, imagine a situation where you want to catch a yak. You let it graze while it's eating grass. Don't startle it, just let the animal eat. As it eats, slowly and gradually, when it's full, it lies down and sleeps there just like that. Without discursive thoughts, it's the same. If they keep arising, just simply let them arise. But in the process of arising, let them settle. At this point, they won't continue, because this is the nature of discursive thoughts. As some masters' teachings explain, our mind is just like a sneaky little thief. If it's a little thief and the people nearby have already noticed him, he won't dare to steal anymore. Similarly, if we recognize our discursive thoughts, they won't dare to continue on. Without recognizing them, they'll keep causing trouble for you. Everyone should be clear about this. This is called letting the mind rest upon the mind in meditation. This is also a very important point, and it is something that you should keep in mind. Letting the mind rest in the midst of the mind, or letting the mind relax. And when thoughts arise, they naturally dissolve. We just let our active mind rest on the bed within the heart of emptiness. Let the mind rest upon the mind. There aren't two minds, but conceptually, when you're visualizing, it's like we talked yesterday, what we simply call self-cognition, or a lamp is self-illumination. In Wisdom chapter, there was a debate about lamp's self-illumination. If a lamp has no darkness, how does it dispel darkness? In fact, conceptually, a lamp is actually luminous. If it is luminous, then it must be able to illuminate by itself. This is often referred to as the lamp's own self-nature of illumination. Our mind is the same way. The mind cannot separate it into knower and known, but the mind completely understands its own nature. We call this the mind's self-illumination and self-knowing. Similarly, just let the mind rest upon itself, or the mind relaxes on its own, naturally and gently. Don't make it tense or try to confine it within some particular boundary, or attempt to limit its natural flow. It's not like that. When the mind is allowed to relax naturally, just as we discussed yesterday, as we talked about, if water is simply left to settle undisturbed and untouched for a considerable period of time, it naturally becomes clear. The mind is the same. If it relaxes all the previous arising thoughts and movements of the mind, the knots of thoughts will unravel naturally, just like how a snake's long winding body slowly untangles itself all on its own without anyone's help. The snake's own body naturally untangles its own knots by itself. It's exactly the same as this. So during the process of practicing calm abiding, for example, everyone may encounter many different kinds of doubts, or sometimes even some frustrations in their practice, or sometimes even truly excessive joy. There's no need to cling to these things. Some people, when practicing calm abiding on their own, find they can remain settled for a long time. They become quite happy and eagerly tell many people, saying, I really want to dwell in meditative absorption now. Some people say this, but this isn't always a good thing either. Sometimes it's often called the demon of joy. If you become too emotionally attached, you are, in a very real sense, also being controlled by the so-called demon of joy. Others feel particularly miserable. I've been repairing so long, but it seems like I really haven't gained anything at all. This thinking is incorrect. Our mind, since beginningless time, has been conditioned for such a long period. So in just a few days, months, or even years, it's not necessarily going to show immediate results for you. Gradually, if you have patience, you will definitely be able to do it. So during our practice, as we go along, everyone should try to consistently increase the frequency of their practice as much as possible in order to see improvement. At the very beginning, the duration shouldn't be too long. If it's too long, you might start to feel a sense of aversion toward meditation. If you become averse, then later when you enter meditation, the effect won't be very good. The great masters of the past have said, at the very beginning, even when your practice is going well, you should pause during your session. This doesn't mean using other discursive thoughts or forcing yourself to cut off and end the session. Doing it that way isn't very good. Leave yourself with a positive impression for your next meditation session. For example, when we're watching an exciting TV series, after the first episode, if it stops at the most exciting moment, then you'll want to watch the second episode. But if the first episode is really boring, you don't want to watch it, then you might not be interested in watching the next episode. Similarly, when we're meditating, if you feel that you're still doing relatively well, pause and end the session at that point. After ending the session, when your body and mind are completely more relaxed, continue it again. This is something that's mentioned quite often in many instructional texts. For example, in the great treatise on the path, it discusses calm abiding and special insight in great detail thoroughly. In this text, sources are cited, including the teachings of well-known Indian master Kamalashila, especially from his Stages of Meditation treatise, as well as the perspectives from the stages of the Bodhisattva path. Calm abiding and special insight are discussed in detail. These are all discussed quite extensively. In fact, when it comes to the methods of practice, there are basically no sectarian differences in viewpoints. In terms of calm abiding, everyone's fundamental understanding is essentially the same. That's really true. If it's dullness, then everyone will call it dullness, rather saying this is Tibetan Buddhism's dullness. Chinese Han Buddhism does not have such dullness. Basically, anything that blocks your practice are those such as dullness and agitation. The antidotes are mindfulness and awareness. They are the same by all traditions. So the various instructions can be beneficially studied and referenced across traditions. The text comprehensively discusses in further detail if you don't recognize arising thoughts in the world, they ultimately have no real meaning. Discursive thoughts are endless, never ceasing themselves. All arising thoughts are always futile. The thoughts and mental movements of sentient beings are filled with endless delusions. They are endless and have no conclusion. From beginningless time until now, they do not naturally simply disappear on their own. Unless you attain Buddhahood or realization, or you enter the formless realm, as previously mentioned above, only then will they naturally subside. Some vanish briefly, while some vanish completely. As for these thoughts that circulate within samsara, actually they are meaningless and really lead to no good outcome. It's not just humans, actually all sentient beings in the 6 realms, such as all kinds of beings, have all sorts of different kinds of thoughts. These thoughts form habitual patterns, but they are meaningless for our true liberation or for many different aspects of our lives. Especially some people's discursive thoughts are abundant, whose minds are active. They are meaningless for liberation. Even in this present life, they bring about truly tremendous and significant confusion and utter widespread, because your mind is constantly thinking about all sorts of things. When you think about many things, you self-inflict a great deal of unnecessary suffering and complications. Haven't I said this before, that we sometimes feel yaks seem to have rather simple minds? It looks as if all they do is eat grass and drink water, and sometimes fight with their fellow animal companions, often in playful or competitive ways. Apart from these behaviors, it seems like when I was young, back in those days, I actually spent many years living with yaks. But I have always felt that people in the urban cities nowadays, I shouldn't say everyone, some in city are good, but many of them are troubled by worries. Compared to these people, the gentle yaks in the remote mountains are much simpler creatures. They really don't have so many concerns or anxieties. But nowadays, many people, in fact, the reason so many people have worries now, it might have something to do with their own way of life in some way. For example, relatively speaking, it's not absolute. Comparatively speaking, children in Tibetan areas, because a family might have 4, 5, 6, or 7 children, they grew up in large families and their neighbors. Each family also has many children. So from a young age, they grow up in an environment of mutual cooperation, whether playing or at home, without exclusion between families. Today, they might visit one home for a meal. Tomorrow, they'll eat at another's. Even now, it's still just like this every single day. Everyone interacts with each other. People aren't excluded. No matter which house you really go to, if it doesn't work out at one place, you just go play at another. It's not like before when some only children didn't want to interact with anyone, even those living right next door. For example, in a building such as an apartment complex, you might reside in Unit 2, someone in Unit 3, another in Unit 4, 3 or 4 units. They basically don't interact with each other at all. Out of concern, children are told not to engage with neighbors. So from a young age, these children develop especially a sense of guardedness. They become fearful and anxious. Such individuals often feel uncomfortable or inferior in group settings. They feel lonely most of the time, developing a sense of being perpetual outsiders. In fact, when it comes to collaborating and working together in the future, absolutely, they'll also face certain difficulties and won't be able to relax. But if we live in a much more relaxed and open environment, in a communal kind of life like that, really including Africa, sometimes it seems like they all have a more open mind. You get the feeling in Tibetan area, it's true that in terms of living conditions and education level, they're not as advanced as people in big cities. Their intelligence and their abilities aren't on the same level either. But sometimes their mindset isn't particularly fearful, anxious, or even worried. It's not like that. Perhaps it's related to certain lifestyle habits or cultural customs that have created these different mental dispositions. In any case, as practitioners, sometimes you really need to relax your mind. If you don't relax, you might keep generating discriminating thoughts. They have not much benefits for our present or future lives. Evil thoughts bring endless suffering. You must recognize the faults of them. You have followed them since beginningless time, you gain no merit at all. Especially for us ordinary beings in samsara, we have an especially large number of negative thoughts. These negative thoughts are in fact endless and inexhaustible, often lingering in our minds. If they are negative thoughts, there will definitely be suffering that never ceases. After we understand these principles, we also realize that sentient beings have been wandering in this cycle since beginningless time and have not gained any merit from it. Not only they fail to gain merit, but they have also, unfortunately, been suffering continuously. In the Sutra Itivutaka, in this sutra, according to the text, it states, because the mind is defiled, speech and action follow. Because our consciousness is tainted, verbal speech and physical actions arise from this impurity. Suffering arises from this just as a wheel turns because of the hand. When we create karma through body, speech and mind, suffering naturally and inevitably follows. This is just like how once you have a hand, you can turn a wheel. Turning the wheel, these two aspects complement each other. So the sufferings we experience in this world first come from taint of ignorance, and then karma is created. And as a result, sentient beings experience suffering. Thus, the source of all this is our failure to control discursive thoughts. If from early on we had practiced contemplation well, if we were good at meditation, we wouldn't create so much negative karma. Our bodies make less karma, and our speech wouldn't create so much karma either. If we don't commit negative karma and rely on virtuous actions, then whether in the desire realm, the form realm, or the formless realm, or, to put it another way, in other possible words or alternative, each and every one of us would all experience happiness in our lives. So for as practitioners, as you already know, this understanding is in fact very important, truly essential. Yes, this is very important. Next, the text continues. Now, having abandoned attachment to this, diligently cultivate concentration, attain samadhi and the many merits of miraculous power. So now that we understand this today, we should cut off our attachment to these aspects, attachment to this life, and eliminate all kinds of desires and cravings that arise in our minds in this life. Then, with all our strength and wholehearted effort, we should practice calm abiding, calming the mind by observing the mind. By doing this, what will we gradually attain in the end? What will we ultimately achieve? We will attain deep meditative concentration and miraculous power, as well as many other various kinds of merits. We will gain a great deal. This concentration, if we do not practice it well in our daily lives, we may not be able to attain it at this time. In Records of the Source Mirror, it says that if a vessel is broken, the moonlight cannot appear in it. Likewise, if sentient beings lack the water of shamatha, the Buddha moon simply will not appear, not at all. Within beings' mind streams, if there is no water of samadhi, it means that if sentient beings lack causes and conditions of meditative concentration, then the Buddha moon, which is the reflection of the Buddha, that is to say, the reflection of the Buddha, will not manifest. In the same way, when we practice any Dhamma, in fact, we actually need to have certain causes and conditions. These conditions of meditation and practice are truly essential. Of course, here it is saying that through consistently practicing calm, abiding meditation, one gradually attains a variety of extraordinary miraculous power. In the Mahayana treatise, it mentions several types of miraculous power. One is karmic power, which is the ability knowing the past life karma, similar to those possessed by celestial beings. One is medicinal powers, where through certain medicines one can attain miraculous power, including the power of miraculous movement, flying, and so on. There is also mantra power attained through mantras. As for mantras, in particular, in the past, some sages used mantras. Ultimately, they ascended to the heavenly realms and lived together with celestial beings there. Another is cultivation power, which is gained through meditative practice. In our Ornament of the Sutras treatise, it says to attain miraculous powers, one must reach the fourth dhyana. If one does not reach the fourth level of concentration, it is difficult. This is also indeed explained quite clearly. In any case, as mentioned in the meaning of the Mahayana, regarding miraculous powers or the other abilities mentioned in various treatises, they all require a certain level of meditative concentration, samadhi. This is very important. The Mahayana Compendium, this sutra, I'm not sure if I've introduced this before. Actually, this is Master Huiyuan from Mount Lu and Kumarajiva. And it's a work where the two of them engaged in mutual discussion. This is quite fascinating, actually. At that time, Kumarajiva was in Chang'an, and he was famous in the north. Master Huiyuan was at Donglin Temple, renowned in the south. There was some correspondence between them, meaning they communicated with each other by sending and receiving letters. It seems Kumarajiva had just finished translating all 100 volumes of the Mahaprajnaparamita Shastra, handed it to the king. After that, the king requested Master Huiyuan to write a preface. But Master Huiyuan was in his 70s, so he tactfully declined and did not write the preface. However, he later felt such a massive work of 100 volumes would be difficult for many people to practice. So for the sake of those with a more limited amount of wisdom and for beginners who may be just starting out, he edited the entire Mahaprajnaparamita Shastra down to 20 volumes. Later, they communicated through various methods, Huiyuan questions and Kumarajiva answers. In fact, Master Huiyuan was very virtuous at that time. He translated a few Tathagata texts at that time then, and he naturally understood the principles of nirvana, such as non-arising and non-ceasing and so on, which were views recognized as valid by Kumarajiva. Later, this Mahayana Compendium read treatise on meaning of Mahayana. Because these two were such remarkable masters, their mutual questions and answers must indeed contain a lot of meaning. We like to use some of these methods as well. Attaining samadhi, supernatural powers and merits, dwelling freely in supreme bliss. And also being able to attain freedom, dwelling calmly in a state of supreme happiness and bliss. Through wisdom, knowing merits and faults, striving to master the mind, before attaining calm abiding, do not let your diligence slacken. Here, it clearly states that by understanding and carefully analyzing the information presented, the virtues of samadhi and cultivating calm abiding, as well as the faults of not having samadhi, after carefully analyzing with this kind of wisdom, one should wholeheartedly strive to master one's own mind. For each of us, see if you can regularly practice a little Dharma. As we discussed recently, if you only talk about it your whole life without practicing, of course, in Mahayana Buddhism, merely discussing it also brings great merit indeed. If we recite sutras every day throughout our lives, that too brings great merit. But reciting is just moving your lips, and speaking also just moves your lips. But truly, your inner mind, deep inside, or your heart, is very difficult to control and very, very hard to tame. If you want to tame your own mind, you must rely on the teachings of great masters of the past and practice diligently. Moreover, some of us young people, if we practice from youth, our minds gradually become capable. Otherwise, when you're young, you might think study and contemplation are most important and never practice. Whenever practice is mentioned, you feel a headache. Forget it, I mainly just read books now. Of course, reading books is very important. Reading books this way is like accumulating wealth is insignificant. I genuinely feel those of us who like books, memorize texts, and people who like to buy books, these people still have very good roots of virtue indeed. For Dharma books, if one has not even the slightest interest, but is only interested in food and drink, if keen on this, if one is particularly keen on these things, then such a person isn't a good practitioner. However, if you compare reading books to actual practice, practice is indeed really very important. If directly comes, the afflictions in our mind stream, difference between practicing and not practicing, teaching and non-teaching are different as well. For example, some of us who serve as counselors or lecturers, we're compelled to study and learn. If you don't do this, your daily time might be wasted unconsciously on discursive thoughts. So what exactly is truly required here for this As a wise person, someone with wisdom, you should cultivate calm abiding through various methods. Before you have developed this state of calm abiding, and you must never ever slacken your diligence. You must not let up in your dedicated pursuit of calm abiding. This is truly the essential point. Actually, when it comes to calm abiding and special insight, and we need to think, what is calm abiding? It's settling the mind using methods of stillness so that the mind, through gentle and sustained effort, gradually attains a state of pliancy and ease. This is calm abiding. As for special insight, it is cultivated through analytical meditation, which is a process of deep contemplation, resulting in a wisdom where both body and mind become capable and at ease. This kind of wisdom is called special insight. In fact, whether it is special insight or a state of calm abiding, the ultimate result is that both body and mind become capable and at ease. When you reach pliancy, no matter how you relax, your mind naturally settles and becomes obedient. Actually, special insight is developed from calm abiding and requires this kind of wisdom. Whether it's calm abiding or special insight, before you attain a level of realization, you need to practice earnestly. Vasubandhu wrote verses on the gate of calm abiding and insight. Some say it contains 70 verses, others 77. This work by Vasubandhu exists in Chinese. I looked it up in Tibetan, but I didn't find it in Tibetan. In Tibetan area, we place great importance on the teachings of Vasubandhu and Asanga. In his verses of calm abiding and insight says, a wise person cultivates concentration as urgently as extinguishing burning clothes. One should abandon all distractions and dwell in a quiet forest. This means a wise person, when practicing calm abiding, should practice with great urgency, just as if trying to save clothes burning on their own body. They should immediately put aside all sorts of trivial and messy affairs and dwell in a particularly quiet forest. In tranquil forest, practicing calm abiding daily. If you live in a relatively quiet place, the wisdom of calm abiding, especially calm abiding, is very easy to arise. Therefore, before you have developed such calm abiding, try your best not to relax. If you practice shamatha seriously for 7 days, then the mind will definitely, without a doubt, gain some noticeable benefit. Or practice for 14 days or for 21 days consecutively in this way, or even for 100 days, your mind should gain capability. If you do not practice, then it may just be something you hear about which doesn't have much meaning. So Mipham Rinpoche also said, if you practice for 7 days, both body and mind will relax and you can attain that kind of warmth sign. Even if you practice for just 7 days, you will gain certain warmth signs. Of course, during practice, as we've mentioned, you shouldn't be too anxious in your mind. If you keep thinking, I must practice, I must really practice, and your mind is too tense, in that situation, it becomes extremely easy for a person to lose their mental sanity or even fall physically ill. There are various situations. So when you practice, you must maintain a relatively relaxed state. If you feel you can make progress in your practice, don't just worry about it. You can still read a book, listen to some music, have some tea or coffee if you like, or have a nice chat with your friends. Although this is a bit scattered, it's still better than going crazy. If you practice too tensely, and in the end, after practice, you end up becoming a lunatic, then it's not worth it. It might even be better for some people not to practice at all. In the past, great masters tailored their requirements to a person's capacity. Some were required to do a 3 months retreat no matter what, while others weren't allowed to retreat even for a day. There were such cases. So everyone's situation and way of practicing is different. If you repeatedly practice like this, drawing the winds into the central channel, your scattered thoughts will quiet and your mind will become more capable. If we keep practicing like this, practicing regularly, doing a session in the morning when you wake up and an evening session, some of our Dharma friends were fond of meditation. Regarding meditation, even when traveling, if they were staying in a hotel, they would meditate after waking up and meditate before sleeping at night. If there was free time, they would meditate too. They were quite willing to certainly do this. If we do this regularly, our winds will enter the central channel. These winds are thoughts, are breath, restless, discursive thought. When discursive thoughts enter the central channel, after entering the central channel, there is the true nature central channel. With the central channel, one enters a state of deep meditation. At this point, your scattered, deluded thoughts become increasingly pacified, and your mind becomes more and more capable. This is the result of practice. If we practice, there will definitely be obvious results over time, unless our karmic obscurations are extremely heavy. If past karma is very heavy and you don't feel anything, then you don't need to worry either. You should pray to your guru and also confess your misdeeds. You should also make mandala offerings and sometimes circumambulate stupas, or use a prayer wheel and recite mantras doing these is sufficient. When practicing, you really shouldn't do it in a state of particular pain or tension or practice while in a state of emotional distress. You didn't want to meditate, but you forced yourself. It's not like we really have to report our attendance every single week now. If that was so, I end up forcing myself to meditate just for the sake of reporting. Doing this won't yield good outcome. To understand everyone's practice, sometimes there are these requirements. For example, after we finish teaching the tantric teachings after a period of time, everyone is obligated to practice for at least 2 complete sets of 7 days at a minimum. If you sincerely pray at that time and do a personal retreat, except for a few dedicated people every year, I just say it and don't really do it. I've actually never done a retreat myself. Sometimes it's a 7-day retreat, but during that time you must put aside all distractions, including things like your phone, and hand them in by force. You have to give them to other kind-hearted Dharma friends. Managing phones mutually might help. Right now, perhaps the biggest problem is our electronic devices. Electronic devices are often especially disruptive to us. You can also make a vow, meditate for 7 days a year, or for a month, or for 100 days. Our mind is a conditioned phenomenon. It will definitely help. Sometimes for myself, when I am humbly walking through these pure and mystical forests, in these pure places, even my dreams seem different from usual. During the day, my faith in the Guru and 3 jewels is stronger. Even when encountering situations, the ability to transform them into the path seems different from when you are among crowds or attending meetings every day. The state of doing things every day is different. So for everyone should create their own opportunities each year. Indeed, some of our dedicated people are truly remarkable. They use their meditation time to dedicate themselves to others. Of course, for some people, their dedication might be even better. If your practice is unsuccessful, you lack compassion and becomes meaningless. No matter what, as long as you practice diligently and repeatedly, you will definitely pacify these discursive thoughts gradually, and your mind will become more capable, and it's certain to happen. At that moment, without needing the teacher's direct pointing out or pith instructions on abiding, smooth winds settle the mind. At that time, you will no longer need other teachers to directly point out the nature of your mind to you. Because in fact, this is actually a practice of calm abiding. For calm abiding, it's possible without other teachers' guidance. If you just simply follow the earlier instructions to practice, even without the pith instructions on abiding from other teachers, it is still fine if you don't have them. Because if you understand mind, observing mind, it's not hard. So even without the guidance of other teachers on their own, without the pith instructions for shamatha, it is still possible to proceed without them. If your winds are relatively smooth and gentle, your mind in general will settle quite easily. If our breath is not smooth, or if the mind is restless and filled with thoughts, then your practice may not be successful. If you can settle your mind, the effectiveness is indeed overall very high. Then naturally your arising thoughts and intentions will be very smooth as well. This includes sleeping very well at night, every day. And during the day, no matter what happens, your mental state throughout daily activities is very good. If you can settle for your designated practice time, there will be no problem. Now, many of us, before and after class, we can settle our minds and meditate for 10 or 5 minutes. It's common. Now, we also briefly settle mind when practicing Guru Yoga before class. In fact, all of these are methods for settling the mind. This is extremely important. In this way, by observing the mind with the mind itself, one truly abides inwardly. Concentration will be won swiftly and effortlessly. So we rely on using the mind to observe the mind itself, truly abiding within, not abiding externally, but in the mind. Within a very short time, one can attain concentration swiftly without effort. Concentration will be won. At that point, your samadhi and meditation are both stable and capable. If any discursive thoughts arise at that time, directly abide on it. This is really very important. In our 30 pieces of advice, it says, when thoughts arise, look directly at them. When certainty is fully attained and recognized, abide in that certainty with confidence. In practice, abiding without fabrication is essential. Anyway, that's the general meaning. When discursive thoughts arise, directly look at those discursive thoughts. When certainty is attained, abide in that certainty. When you can settle, there is no need to practice. There's really nothing to practice. This is the key point. The main thing is to practice without distraction. In practice, the mind should not be distracted. Whether thoughts or certainties arose, or abiding is arose, all of these are within a single state. Make sure not to lose your mind frequently. If the mind is lost, it will wander off. When you use the mind to observe the mind, as we discussed, it's like herding cattle. Wherever the yaks wander, if within your sight, within the range of your attention, just as when elders care for children, as long as they're within your sight and not lost, the elder doesn't go one by one. To each child, ask him, what are you doing? What are you playing? He won't do that. If you did this, your original meditative state will already have been disrupted. Observe from a broader perspective. As for the subtle thoughts within, you don't need to bother with those either. Your mind just keeps gentle watch over it with gentle awareness within this larger scope. In this way, actually, in a very short time, your mind will become capable and attain this concentration. At this point, there is no need to visualize bindus or letters, nor is there any need to hold the winds. View and rest in the nature of your own mind and sustain its continuity mindfully. These are Mipham Rinpoche's pith instructions. When you observe the mind with the mind, there is no need for your mind to visualize a 5-colored bindu, or to visualize white ah syllable in heart center, or to visualize at your navel area the vase breath, or to hold the winds. None of these are necessary. So what should you observe? Simply observe that I have a mind, that is, there is a mind that exists and is present. There is this mind I have. And at the same time, maintain a right mindfulness and awareness to protect it. You maintain mindfulness with each supporting the other, not lose it as taught in Chan Buddhism. If it keeps clear and not lost, that is already sufficient. When practicing calm meditation, some may immediately think the mind should be controlled. But if you try to control the mind, it's best to keep it within a broad boundary without scattering. But within that smaller range, it may still move around inside, including having thoughts arise, daydreaming, or fantasizing. There may even be all sorts of subtle fluctuations and movements, but you don't need to worry too much about that. As long as the mind keeps settling again and again, settling using various methods to help, at a certain point, the mind will return on its own. You don't need to deliberately use antidotes to control it. When you practice directly in this way, it will simply naturally settle. At this point, the mind willingly, without you intentionally or forcefully trying to control it, there's no need. At the beginning, some elder people may say, you can't go there, you can't go. But when children grow up a little and they know where they can play and they won't run off to faraway places, mind is like this. In the end, it will observe itself. You see, that is to say, observe your own mind. When practicing, you don't need to ask, should I observe this or that? You don't need to worry. Mipham Rinpoche says it's still about using the mind itself to observe the mind in calm abiding. Of course, as I've said in some other practices, it carries powerful blessing to observe Buddha's image. In the past, at other universities, I've given lectures on meditating on the Buddha's image. When I was at Yale University, I taught them the 9 stages of mental abiding. They were actually quite interested, genuinely intrigued, in fact. I explained meditation on the 9 stages of mental abiding. And then in Melbourne, or maybe somewhere else, at that time we talked about meditation in movement. That is, how to meditate when the mind is unsettled and restless. At that time, I referred to teachings from great masters of the past. At the same time, I also used some modern language that people today can accept to explain to them. All of this is my understanding. What I taught is not like the teachings of His Holiness, who could naturally express wisdom from within. I am not. We might piece together some teachings through various conceptual thoughts and intentions, carefully considering and evaluating each along the way. So when you practice this, pay attention to these points. There is no more profound, simple, and practical or beneficial teaching on samatha. These are important instructions. Apart from these, there is really nothing deeper and more profound. There may be many instructions, including Vajrayana methods and Sutrayana methods, but for something deeper yet simple and easy, for teachings on calm abiding that are beneficial, according to Mipham Rinpoche, there are none beyond these. Indeed, we truly find that although there are many ways, this one is profound and simple and is really helpful. It helps in practice, study, and contemplation. Even for people with hot tempers, if they regularly practice samatha, as we often say, as you may have heard before, when yogi gets angry, it's like striking the surface of water with a wooden stick. When you hit water with a stick, there's a ripple, but it quickly smooths out and disappears. So generally speaking, in most cases, even if someone who practices regularly loses their temper, after they express it, the anger disappears almost immediately. But if you're not like this, if you're someone who waters your discursive thoughts, after arguing with someone today, you may hold on to that for 3 or 4 years, and when you see that person again, you just start cursing them all over again once more. It could be like that. Generally, people who practice well are like this. Those who practice and who don't are really different. For practitioners, their temperament, though with afflictions, is, as other masters have taught before in their instructions, it's like the wind in spring. Even though it blows, its force is very weak. If you regularly practice calm, abiding meditation, You experience anger, but it will disappear right away. Our minds can be focused when listening and contemplating. When you take an exam, if your mind is especially scattered at the moment, then even if you know, you might not be able to write it down. It's same when giving a lecture. If you regularly meditate, then from start to end, your lecture will likely be logical and well structured. The organization will be very clear. Without regularly observing your mind may be scattered. If you are giving a class, it's not easy to be focused for long. It's also very difficult to keep focused the whole time. Same goes for listening to a class. If your mind lacks proper training, it's very hard for your mind not to be scattered. So when it comes to our practice, this applies to all activities at any time. When they do things, some people see things through well, but others, as they work, a distracting thought arises, and then they give up halfway. So actually for us as Buddhist practitioners, meditation is very important. Why do so many Westerners meditate regularly to improve their work efficiency? Take Steve Jobs, for example. All of his employees at Apple would meditate during breaks and before meetings. Because during meetings, they needed to bring out a lot of great wisdom and creativity. So for many scientists, there's a common understanding that their creative ideas come because their minds become calm. When the mind is calm within our alaya, there are many treasures of wisdom. These treasures can be unearthed through samatha. In this regard, the merits may be immense. I probably don't need to elaborate further here. At first, the mind abides and observes itself. In the end, it's like gazing into space, finding nothing. Wrong views naturally disappear. In the very beginning, when our mind abides in itself and we use mind to observe mind, it's just like when we keep looking into empty space. In that vast expanse, you won't find anything to see at all. In the same way, if we regularly observe the mind through the mind itself, then these wrong views, greed, anger, attachment of existence and non-existence, will all be naturally liberated. This is actually a rather advanced level, just as it is stated in the condensed Prajnaparamita Sutra. Some people claim to see the space. How can one see the space? Some say they see empty space, but how can one see space? If observing, seeing space is impossible, this teaching is stated. Similarly, if you first regularly settle your mind and then use the mind to observe the mind, then all discrimination and all negative thoughts will immediately disappear. As mentioned in Lamp of Certainty, it's like you're looking at the space. When your mind is actively thinking, you must deeply develop certainty in emptiness. That is to say, at a certain point, so to speak, when approaching Dzogchen, it's like seeing empty space. Even as thoughts continue to arise, one is abiding in a state of emptiness. Dzogchen is like this. Looking into space is actually the same as recognizing the nature of our own mind. If you diligently observe the mind and abide in the mind, it's like looking into space and finding nothing. Your afflictions and your suffering, whatever they may be, slowly and steadily begin to fade away and diminish over time. Little by little, their presence becomes less noticeable. Luminosity and emptiness are inseparable, like gazing into space. The Lamp of Certainty says, clarity, emptiness, non-duality. Is just like when we look into space, this non-dual state of clarity and emptiness can actually manifest at that time. The state of luminosity and emptiness being inseparable is just like gazing into space. These can arise naturally. This should be final stage, which is advanced. Mipham Rinpoche first spoke about calm abiding, and now, if you contemplate in this way, it's very likely that you will attain realization of Dzogchen. At this point, it happens very quickly. So what is it like at this stage? Clarity, emptiness, non-duality reveals the nature of phenomena. At this time, the union of luminosity and emptiness manifests together, revealing the mind's secret. The two are inseparable. This appears as the nature of all phenomena. In other words, it can appear by relying on the key instructions of the nature of phenomena. And then at this point, realization through the blessings of the lineage is next. It might be better to place these 3 lines at the end, use commas for all of them. Put a period at the end of the sentence. The nature of phenomena is revealed, realized by lineage blessings, or see by lineage blessings. By lineage blessings, one sees the primordial wisdom of self-arising awareness, emptiness, and the meaning of luminous great perfection. With lineage blessings, one can realize what's realized, the self-arising wisdom of great awareness, emptiness. In other words, this is the meaning of luminous great perfection. It means if we frequently practice such calm abiding and rely on the blessings of the lineage masters of the past, we can personally realize the awareness of the great awareness, emptiness, or the innate, naturally present wisdom that each of us possesses. This naturally present wisdom, the true meaning of luminous great perfection. This means that if we frequently practice calm abiding with the lineage master's blessings, you will understand the meaning of primordial great perfection. You realize it. At that point, everything truly becomes much easier. Written during the midday session on January 6th in the year of the Fire Horse by Mipam Rinpoche. Very good. This concludes the teachings on Samatha.
Bandara